We are live and starting the podcast. Welcome to the Vinh and Ali show. There's something we have to address immediately. The title of this book requires us to swear. Now, we have to make the choice right at the start, Ali. Do we swear or do we replace that word with another word so that we can say it freely? Because I know there are some young people who listen to us and I don't want to be a bad influence, etc. What do you reckon we should do? We're kind of making this decision live on this podcast.
This definitely could have been something that we discussed prior to going live. I do like that we're doing that right now.
I didn't want to. I want to do it right now.
Well, it's a great exercise. Like, what do we replace that word with? What came to your mind?
I was thinking, well, my son's really into animals. You know, Xander loves animals. And I thought the classic go-to could be duck.
All right, done.
Do you reckon we just do that? Just keep it kind of PG, keep it friendly?
Let's go duck. We generally keep it pretty clean, so why not?
All right. Well, welcome to the Vinh and Ali show, everyone, once again, as we begin properly. The book we're reviewing this week is called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Duck. I bet you I'm going to say it wrong and actually swear at some point. So again, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Duck is written by Mark Manson. And just quickly from the top, I'd love your point of view in a second. But for me, reading this book was fun. There was some, I don't know what it was, but there was something fun about reading a book with a lot of swear words in it. It's like, oh, it's so naughty. It's like things you're not allowed to do. And he's just swearing all throughout the book. And it's just, I found it humorous. I laughed at many points, which I really do for books. How did you find it?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the things that we spoke about the other week, right? Is I remember reading this book, I think it was maybe 5-6 years ago. And I actually found my old iBooks version of the book. And it was probably one of the only books where I've got little highlights where it's just simply ha ha as the note or like a laughing emoji, which I can't really remember doing in, call it a non-fiction, professional, personal development type of book before. So very, I think, humorous writing style. I'm guessing probably a pretty polarizing writing style as well, just because of the way that he operates. But I put my hand up saying that I laughed multiple times, even on the reread of this one.
Well, let me give everyone a bit of a taste of a passage that made me write LOL and LMAFO, right? Yeah. Laughing my ass off. I think I just totally said the acronym wrong. But for example, it's something like this. We feel bad about feeling bad. We feel guilty for feeling guilty. We get angry about getting angry. We get anxious about feeling anxious. What is wrong with me? This is why not giving a duck is so key. This is why it's not going to save the world. And it's going to save it by accepting that the world is totally ducked up and that's all right. Because it's always been that way and it always will be. It's just, the way he writes is, I think what makes it funny is the blatant truth. Full aspect of what he's saying, how a lot of the times either in society we sugarcoat stuff or we don't talk to the truth, we kind of beat around the bush, whereas I find that he's just punching the truth in the face.
Yeah, he's definitely got his version of call it as it is happening all throughout the book, and I think that's cool. I think a lot of the times when we read books, they're written probably to please everyone and just a little bit more on the safe side, whereas I guess starting from the top, even going with the title, I'm sure that would have been a very interesting conversation with these publishers. This is what I want to call the book, and this is the line that we're going to go down. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I had one that was pretty funny too that made me laugh. He's like, back in Grandpa's day, he would feel like shit and think to himself, gee whiz, I feel like a cow turd today. But hey, I guess that's just life. Back to shoveling hay. People didn't take their lives and themselves so seriously. I think that's just great.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. That's good. I like it. Oh, far out. Well, I mean, look, let's get into it. Let's get stuck into it. Now, with this particular book, what was your first takeaway that you really liked? And let's pull this apart a little and have a bit of a chat about it.
I think one of the lines that really aligned with me was just his top line sort of message, which is get clarity on what you want to give a duck about, right? Like that was a big message that stood out, that in life, like a lot of times we end up giving a duck about a lot of things and we don't really maybe think about it, with too much depth. And we always speak about this too, around getting clarity and getting alignment and finding, call it, our version of whatever the truth is in that moment. And I think this book presents that in a really unique way, which was pretty cool. So that was just a big message at the top of it. It's like, we're all going to care about things and things are going to pop up in our lives, but what is it realistically that we should care about? And which are certain things that maybe we need to stop caring about as much, and using that as a tool to maybe make decisions, how to prioritize. Like I think in one of our other episodes we did one of Derek Sivers' books, which is pretty similar too, which is, if it's not a hell yeah, it should be an F no. So I think that's a cool little framework.
Yeah. And what I really liked about it is Mark talks about how we have limited number of ducks that we can give every day, right? There's only a limited number of ducks that we have. I kind of like this whole switching the F word for duck. It's kind of funny because think about it. Let's say that in a day, you've only got 10 ducks and you can only give 10 ducks away per day. And I think a lot of the times we give 10 ducks in the first 4 hours of our day, right? Immediately you start the day, something upsets you, boom, there, you've given a duck away. You've only got 9 ducks left. And then you're in the car and then you're on the way to work. It's a massive traffic jam. Boom, you've just given another 6 ducks away. Now you're down to 3. So before you even get to work, you've got 3 ducks left. And to live, I feel, a life that is meaningful and fulfilling, we need to be giving ducks to the situations or people that matter, not just randomly giving them away. Right. Yep. I think that randomness causes people a lot of pain without knowing. And then you also feel so tired. You still feel so fatigued. You feel like you're overthinking and you've got no cognitive capacity left to deal with the things that happen in life. And it's just really interesting. Yeah. I love that concept too. So then how do you identify if you're giving too many ducks away? I mean,
yeah.
How do you go about applying that wisdom?
I always love tracking, right? Like if you keep a journal or you have a list there, it would just be as simple as maybe over a week's period of time, listing all the things that you gave a duck about. Where did your ducks really go, or the bigger ducks? And were they sort of nourishing? Were they depleting? Were they your duck to really care about? Like, did it deserve that level of bandwidth or energy? And then are there any adjustments that you can make in the way that you operate? Because I think there's usually a couple of different types of things that we care about too, right? Like some are reactive that just get put on our plate. They might not necessarily be the ducks that we want, but they're just given to us and we have to sort of deal with those. And then there's others where they're proactive and we get to choose what they are. So how do you make those a little bit more impactful? And I think it's just probably a bit of an iteration process. Even the other day we were having a chat and one of the questions that came up was, even when you go and you see like motivational speakers and you see people that are like, just go give things a go and go and change your life and do all these things. Like realistically, how do you actually incorporate that on a practical level? And I think the only way that I've found that it's possible to do that, because everyone's got limitations with the amount of time, energy and resource that they've got at their disposal. So maybe that is the way, is just having a look, well, can you make a minor adjustment just based on what your current mix is and change that up just a little bit?
It's really about, like you said, first becoming aware of where and who you're giving your ducks to. Where are you sending them? Where are you giving them? Because I think that awareness is really important, first of all, because a lot of the times I don't think people are aware that they give too many ducks.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They're just not aware that they're giving too many ducks. And once you start to become more aware, and like you said, that's the power of you tracking your entire life, right? Is you are so aware where you're placing those ducks. So you can check if you're misplacing them, and you can see if it's the optimal place for you to put it. Whereas I don't think a lot of people do that, utterly. I don't think a lot of people track everything in their lives the way you do. So I think for everyone listening, it's important for them to go back to self-awareness. You have to, first of all, kind of look at your life, recalibrate and go, well, where am I placing all the focus? Right. And then what I love about the book too is it talks about how if something is pissing you off, then that means it's also in conflict with one of your biggest values. That's why it's pissing you off. The emotion of being angry and upset comes from a conflict with one of our core values. And then what he says is look at the situation, recognize that you're angry, and then check to see which value that clashes with. And then once you check the value, just do another check to see if that value is still serving you. And I really like that because I've never seen that. I've never heard someone talk about that sequence like that in terms of emotions come from a conflict in values. And then that next check, which I found really insightful, is, well, is that value still serving you?
Yeah, I really like that. I love he has a line in the book where he says, you know who bases their entire lives on their emotions? 3-year-olds and dogs. And you know what else 3-year-olds and dogs do?
Oh, shit,
they shit on they shit on carpets.
I do love that. I do. That's fantastic. Another classic funny. I love that. That's hilarious. And it's true. It's actually true. Yeah.
And I think what you said there, and we obviously do a fair bit of stuff on values. I also I forgot the notion of emotions and how emotions really underpin our values and our beliefs. And
you're a fairly emotionless person. So I think
I'm very
surprise.
I'm very emotionally in touch. All right,
no, you're not. Oh, no, you're not. But that's fine.
Just in a robotic kind of way. It's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I think that's really cool because even if you are someone that's doesn't really wear their emotions on their sleeve too much, I think even then there's still a very big likelihood that your behaviors and your actions are still driven by emotions and feelings that you're trying to generate. You know, even if you are very much that A-type, really stern type of person, I think there's still if not maybe even more than somebody who's very emotionally open. They're wearing their emotions on their sleeve in just a completely different way. Usually it's around being protected and closed off or trying to stay very much in a balanced zone, but it's still a way of a feeling or an emotion that's trying to be an emotional state that's trying to be reached. And yeah, what came up for you when you were thinking about how feelings and emotions dictate your behaviors and your actions?
Well, I mean, back to what I shared there before is that for me, I started thinking about the moments where I got really upset, right? Because again, it's moments when I am upset, those are the moments I'm giving away some ducks, right? So I thought, okay, when was the last time I felt really upset? And then there's a recent thing that's happened in my life where I got scammed, right? So I got scammed and it made me feel really upset. And I started to think to myself, well, why did I get upset? Which value did that clash with? And the value that it clashed with for me was, life should be fair, right? Or it's really about, I guess, justice. There should be some justice in the world. People shouldn't just be able to scam you, right? And I thought, okay, well, is that value still serving me? And then when I worked through the process, I kind of went, yeah, well, that value does still serve me. Because if I hold that value high, it means that when I do business and when I'm in business dealings, I'm not going to scam other people. I'm going to find the way that's fair. I'm going to find a path that's win-win. And therefore, me getting upset over that wasn't necessarily a negative thing because it's a value that's still serving me. Whereas, for example, if I wanted to go out and buy a Lamborghini, for example, and then I checked, let's say, for example, I really gave 3 ducks because I really want this Lamborghini. Let's say, for example, I check which value that is. And
that's a cheap Lambo, just 3 ducks. That's good.
3 ducks, yeah. Well, no, maybe $500,000 ducks. That's probably the right, because it's Australian, there's a luxury tax. So $500,000. So, gosh, what are you, a billionaire, Vin? No.
Yeah. Everyone gets a Lambo at that price.
Yeah, dude, I'd buy, if it costs 3 ducks, I'd get every single person in my social circle one. Right?
So
every single person. Yeah, I would get
So
one for every
fair.
single one of our I would get one for every single one of our podcast listeners if it was 3 ducks. Dude, it'd be the Oprah Winfrey version of you get a Lambo, you get a Lambo,
no.
you go, yeah.
There's only
Because we don't
3 ducks listening to this, so it's fine.
No, that's 9, dude. Come on, you can't even do basic math. If we've got 3 listeners to the podcast, that's only 9 ducks I have to give. And technically, great marketing campaign because everyone on the Vinh and Ali show got a Lando.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, back to what I was saying. So I looked at that. Okay, so that's a situation where I'd give 500,000 ducks, right? So say you really wanted this thing, and then the value that's causing me to give so many ducks in that situation is probably the value of me wanting to appear successful. I feel inadequate. Like I want to look successful. I care about status, and I'm playing the status game. And then in that sense, when you review it, you go, well, does it serve me playing the status game? Well, not really, because we learned this from the last book we read, our last episode of the podcast, which was The Psychology of Money, is when people see you in a cool car, you're sitting in the car thinking, wow, everyone thinks I'm so cool. Look at them dropping their jaws at me. No, Ali. They're not dropping their jaws at you. They're just thinking, wow, that car's really cool. That car's really cool. But the guy sitting in it, what a loser. Look at him. Just look at him with his unshaved face and his circular head. You have a great
They don't
shape.
automatically like you, do they? No.
Well, no. And then but then taking that thought process through that simple little path of going, where's the emotion arising? Is it negative? Okay. Are too many ducks being given? Okay, cool. Which value does that relate to? Okay, cool. Does that value serve me? It just allows a thinking path or just a path to think through that allows you to really decide, well, am I going to keep this value or am I going to update the value? Because if then you change the value, then you don't give any more ducks, right? You don't care anymore. And I think the classic example they used in the book that Mark talked about was, I can't remember his name. He's the Beatles guy that got kicked out. What was his name? Well, that guy. Right? There was a band member in the Beatles that got kicked out, and then the Beatles became wildly successful. And then he sat there the entire time feeling really shitty about himself. And then he had to go through this process to go, well, what value does this, why am I feeling so shitty? I'm giving so many ducks about this situation. What value is it? Oh, it's because I value fame. I value fortune. And then he changed his values and said, those don't serve me anymore. Instead, I value being there with my kids. I'm being there with my family. I value now creating memorable moments with my family. And then when he shifted his value, he was able to minimize the pain that he felt. And I really love that. It's just a nice little simple framework it's almost like a quick audit for you.
Yeah, it's a great check. I think even for decision making, like if you, and it takes even we've found this when we've done this process with others. Values is always one of the hardest things to get clarity on. And it's also one of the hardest things to think about. When somebody asks you, why do you do something? Or well, what value of yours, there's so many books where they say if you really want to get to the depth of something, you ask why 5 times. Now, I've read that 50 times in different books. Do you know how hard it is to actually do in practice to get to that level of depth? Because your brain automatically just wants to make the decision on the surface level. It doesn't want to go down through.
Hey, let's give it a go.
Depth. All right.
Let's give it a go. All right, let's give it a go. Let's try.
Okay. I'll ask you. We'll use your example.
Of course, you're asking me. Yeah, I love this, Ali. I always start the show. I always close it out. When there's an example, just throw it to Vinh. I see where this is going. I'm giving too many ducks in this situation. Maybe I should check my values.
This is your duck giving time.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. All right.
Which one do you want to do? Do you want to do Lamborghini or what's another, or do you want to do the scam? Do you want to do, is there another, or do we look at a different situation that you're looking at getting?
Let's look at a situation. Let's give a fresh situation. All right. So a moment where I gave a lot of ducks. I would say earlier last year, I had a situation, for those who are big fans of the show would know that I struggled to buy the Jeep. There was a Jeep that I really wanted. I wanted the Jeep Gladiator. I wanted to build like a full overlanding rig and a camping rig, etc. And it took me forever to make that decision, at least 6-7 months. And like for 6-7 months, I was giving ducks every day. It's like, oh, should I do it? Should I not do it? I'm paying. Yeah. So let's use that.
Awesome. Beautiful. So let's start it with, so why did you want the Jeep?
You're right. It is hard. Damn it, stumped first question.
I got really scared when I asked you why did you want the Jeep, because then I'm like, am I just going to keep asking him why did he want the Jeep over and over again until you start crying?
I'm going to end up selling the Jeep now because, spoiler alert, I bought it. But okay, all right. So why did I want the Jeep? Because I wanted to have a car that would help me explore a different side of who I am.
Awesome. So that's one. And I think you've even gone probably a level deeper. Like, say if you hadn't already gone through this process, it might have been okay. Jeeps are cool. I want a new car, right? Like, so there's a variety of it. So say if you start at that surface level. So again, you wanted to. So what did you just say then? You wanted to explore a different side of who you were?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome.
I wanted to buy a car that I wouldn't usually be drawn to. It's like, awesome. When you're trying to create those new neural pathways in your brain, you have to do something that's not typical, something that's not almost predictable, right?
Awesome. Yep. So why did you want a car that was a little bit different and would let you explore a different part of yourself?
Because I wanted to introduce a little more fun back into my life. I felt like everything in my life became too predictable. The predictable car for me to get was maybe going to be another sports car or something, right? Mm-hmm. I wanted to get something that was kind of out of left field.
Yep.
Right. Again, it was just, I wanted to try a new experience instead of trying the same experience over and over and over again.
Yep. And why do you think you wanted more fun in your life?
Because I wanted to involve my family, right? Because my business is only fun for me. I want, my business is a vehicle for me to have fun, but I guess I wanted another vehicle. And I guess this is literally another vehicle. I wanted another vehicle where my family could be a part of this experience and we could share that fun.
Yep. And why did you want something unique? Or something that felt a little bit different?
Unique? Well, I think the correct question is, why did I want to share fun with my family?
No, that was going to be the next one, but you had two parts in the last one.
All right. I'll answer yours then.
All right.
I'm going to ask questions. I'll let you lead this show. Why did I want something unique? Because I felt like my life was getting I felt like it was a bit boring.
Yeah. Cool. So that makes sense. So that ties in with fun. And then why did you want to do something a little bit different, like a different experience with your family?
Because I felt like even in the way we were connecting, it was through repetitive experiences. And I wanted to throw something new into the mix so that we could explore, or so that we could potentially have. The reason I wanted that with my family is that I wanted to explore the opportunity of sharing a hobby or a passion together. And that was camping.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Like, I think what we did 4 questions there, maybe 5 questions. And even that just as a cool exercise of seeing how you color that picture in around what some of the underlying values were that were driving that. Because I remember when you were going through this process, I think you really did start with the fact that am I just buying a car for the sake of buying a car?
That's right. Because you're right. And that first layer was, it looks cool. Right?
Yeah, it looks cool. I just want a Jeep. I want something different. I'm a bit bored, right? Like you touched on those things and maybe they are some of, the initial more surface level things that drew you to that decision. But then I remember even when you went through that process, it didn't take long for you to get down to the point that you wanted to be out in nature. You wanted to spend more time with your family. You wanted a little bit of variety. You wanted to connect it with a passion and a hobby. Then you found, I think, other values that linked to it. And I think it made that purchase decision, even I'm trying to think back, it was a while ago, that then made it a little bit easier, right? So So I think, I don't know if we were that clear on that, but it's more that when you are weighing up decisions and you're trying to make choices or you're trying to allocate ducks that you're going to give, this type of process, whether you do it with a friend or by yourself or you write it out, it can just help you with confirming whether that's a pathway that you want to prioritize or not. And like you said with the other one, maybe with the sports car or whatever else, it's like that just might not, the reason why you might have gone against that one in the short term is that it's maybe at the moment just not hitting as many of those points for you. But that can also change as well. Like you might find a community of Lambo drivers that you want to connect with and then go out there driving Lambos, and it can change as well, which is pretty cool.
And what I want to say is I think there's also a layer of sometimes you do the 5 whys and you don't get past the 3rd layer because there isn't one.
Yeah.
Right. And that might be a good test, because if you can't even get past layer 2 or 3, you've got to really question that decision, right? Because let's say, for example, all right, let's say I wanted to do something crazy. I wanted to buy a Lamborghini. And the first layer is, because, man, the car looks cool. Second reason, because then people, when I drive around, people probably feel like, wow, that person's so successful, which is, we know is not really true. People just think you're a bit of a wanker, or they just like your car and don't like you. And then let's say I say, okay, so then I'll get the respect of others, for example. And then if you keep pushing me on it, I don't know what else to say. Like I actually don't know what else to say.
Right. I just had a look at, I accidentally just saw the comments on the side there, and I think we might be having technical difficulties.
Those technical difficulties are only for the live session. Our recording is fine.
All right, beautiful. Cool.
Yeah.
We will share it after. Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Continue, my friend.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I went down that Lamborghini path, the first one is, look, the car looks cool. Second thing is people will think I'm cool. And if you push me a layer further, I don't think I have another layer.
So there not yet. There isn't that 3rd or 4th level layer.
Not really. And I mean, if I really pushed hard, the 3rd layer and probably the final layer is that because I don't feel successful, and by having it, it will make me feel more successful. But then I really think that train of thought, if you just prod it a little more and you dig a little bit deeper, you'll find that that's not how you feel more successful, you know?
And
so it's
sometimes in life, you might only need 1 or 2 layers, right? Like there's certain things that we do on a day-to-day basis where it only needs layer 1. You know, I don't need to know the why of why I need to go grab a glass of water or go to the toilet. Like that's pretty much locked in.
Layer 1.
So then it's layer 1 stuff. And then there's certain things that might need layer 3. There's certain things that might need layer 5, just depending on.
That's a really good point though, because then it's important then to recognize that the decisions you're currently making, is it layer 1 approval, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, layer 5? What we're talking about here are the real big life decisions, right? And yeah, I guess the bigger the decision, the bigger the impact, the deeper you better be able to go in terms of the 5 whys.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool chat.
And I think,
really like it.
I love what you just said there, because that's the point where I think where we find conflict is sometimes we make something that's going to cost us a level 5 equivalent of time, energy, and resources, but we only give it layer 2 level of thinking. And then we feel that discomfort in the mismatch, because we're like, okay, this is actually a level 5 decision, but I've just impulsively jumped into it with level 2 approach.
Right.
And then as it starts playing out, it just isn't thought out well enough. And then you feel like you're kind of sinking in that decision, or it hasn't really hit your needs or what you expected from it enough. And then sometimes maybe we do level 5 types of thinking. We overthink things that really didn't require it. And it was only just a quick decision. It's like, look, this is really a level 2 decision. I just had to make a call and then move forward on it.
Some of my students who are in the communication world and want to make videos for social media go down to level 5 thinking for a video that's going to last 30 seconds on their stories on Instagram. That's only going to last 24 hours.
Yeah. That 50 people are going to say or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we overthink. And then that's funny. I think that's a trap that we tend to fall for. Now, that trap is dangerous because it stops you from starting, right? To overthink simple decisions stops you from starting. But then to underthink important decisions puts you into a hole that sometimes takes a long time to dig yourself out of. It's like I have friends, people I know who've invested in certain things and cryptocurrency, and then didn't think about it enough, didn't learn about it enough, and then sunk a lot of money into it and lost a lot of money. And that required level 5 thinking, right? That required you to really spend time. And so I think that's a really interesting point. It's just having that self-awareness to identify, okay, the situation in front of me, how deep do I need to go with the thinking for this decision?
Yep.
And immediately just having the awareness right in that moment to go, okay, this is level 3, this is level 5, this is level 1. I think even that simple little takeaway alone is going to help you move through life with a little more grace and a little more wisdom.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really cool insight that I've never really looked at when we've spoken about these things before. That's cool.
Yep. I like
the
it.
The next one that I like, or you go.
No, go for it, bro.
Me or you?
Seems like you got one there already.
I love this, where he talks about disappointment panda. Do you remember that bit in the book?
Read the passage out. Is there a passage you have in front of you? Because if you do, read it.
I don't have the full passage, but what I've got here is don't hope for a life without problems. Hope for a life of good problems. And this is what like happiness really is about. It's about, what is the quality of the problems that you solve. Now, I don't know if you can remember what the whole disappointment panda component was, but it was something along the lines of what, like,
what I remember of Disappointment Panda, I definitely remember laughing while reading it. It's that Disappointment Panda is a character he created that comes and gives you the reality slap, right? Comes along and goes, hey, look, you're not really special. You're not that unique. You're not as great as you think you are. You are going to suffer through your entire life because life is all about suffering. It's mostly going to be shit. And you're most likely not going to do anything that's going to have that much impact in the world. And you'll probably leave no legacy. Just letting you know, Disappointment Panda. That's my rendition of Disappointment Panda as he walks away waddling his bottom eating bamboo.
Just really happy with himself. Yeah, that's brilliant. Mm-hmm. And I think that we all have that version of that inner voice that exists in some way, shape, or form, right? They're just telling us that,
mine sounded really, really eloquent, and it seems like it's a big problem in our life, doesn't it? It was so well delivered. That
I know.
I hear that quote every day.
Your primary internal dialogue is Disappointment Panda.
The way I delivered that was way too smooth, man. There was no thinking time. It was as if it's a soundtrack. It was like I was reciting my favorite song.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I killed Disappointment Panda like 15 years ago. That's enough of you, buddy. We don't need your negativity in here. We've got enough going on. That's hilarious. But I love that notion though of, I think a lot of the times we're like, if I just do this, this, and this, I won't have any problems. And then I will have that feeling of peace or freedom. Whereas what you said before as well, that life is largely a series of situations and problems and decisions, and it doesn't really stop. It just depends on, can you keep improving the quality of what those types of problems are that align with who you are? And I thought that was pretty cool concept.
Yeah. Well, pause for a second. What you mean by life is just a series of problems is, I think what Mark mentions in the book is, he says, all right, you solve one problem, but the solution for one problem opens up more problems, right? So, for example, you buy your dream house, and you're like, "Yay, I'm in my dream house." Well, now you've got the next set of problems you have to face. You got to pay the mortgage. You got the next set of problems you got to face. Well, now do I use more of my savings to furnish it the way I want? Oh, should I get a bigger TV? Oh, should I renovate the kitchen? Oh, there's
something wrong with that. Yeah,
that's right. Should I render the walls? Should I do the yada 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 yada? So the recognition of the realization that the solution to one problem just opens you up to a new series of problems. And then those new series of problems, as you solve those, open you up again to a new series of problems. And the idea I think Mark's trying to share there behind all of that is, well, just make sure you pick good problems.
Yeah.
Because if you solve a good problem, well, then hopefully that solution to the good problem leads you to better problems, right? Otherwise, if you start solving bad problems, then you'll have more or worse problems to solve, and then it just kind of is a spiral towards hell.
And I think we all feel it too, right? Like when there's problems that don't really energize us or really bring us down, a lot of the times we have that internal feeling where there is a little bit of conflict, right? Like they make us feel overwhelmed, or they drain us of energy, or they keep running through our minds all the time. And a lot of the times those problems, you know, like if we think about it, the quality of those problems maybe aren't at the level that we want them to, where they feel more like an obligation or a weight. Whereas then there's other times where it's still the same thing, but it doesn't even feel like a problem. Like you're fully energized and you're working away at something for 10 hours a day, and it's, you know, it's collaborating with people and you're passionate about it and you love what you're doing. Like that's still a problem that you're figuring out and you're solving, but it doesn't have that negative connotation or feel like a problem. And I think trying to find some of that awareness around, okay, what are the situations that I love engaging with that spark me up a bit more? And then what are the ones that I'm engaging with that might be bringing me down a little bit? And sometimes there's a little bit of both. Like I've had so many in my life where it can start off being something that's really painful and just feels like it's unsolvable. But then as you start working through it and you go deeper and deeper into it, then you're like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And then on the other side, there's usually something amazing on it. But I think having that intention of this is a problem or a situation that I want to focus on. That is one of.
Well, can I ask you to share an example with specifics, if you're comfortable?
You cannot.
Because you know, because every time you show an example, it's like, so my example is, you know, there was a moment when I felt, you know, there was a problem, and then that moment was really impactful, and then I solved it, and it felt really good. You know, I'm sure. Give me some details, brother. It's always, in your case, it's always A plus B equals C.
Yeah, it's really simple. There's
yeah. No, but did you have an example? I mean, is there something you can think of that you feel comfortable sharing? And if you don't, that's okay too, brother. I'm just calling out.
Yeah, I think one, and I don't know how good an example this is, but I remember when we were trying to have kids, right? Like that was a situation that we knew that we wanted to have kids, and we were trying for a while, and then it's one of those ones where you don't really have too much control, but you still are focused on the process and the outcome. So my wife Chantel and I, we eventually ended up going through the process of doing IVF, and that's how we had our two boys. And you go through that process, and I think that was one that had that mixture of it, because there was lots of like times where I think both of us were like, oh man, this is a really shitty problem that we have to solve. That at that time, not many of our friends were really in a similar situation or family were in a similar situation where they were solving a similar type of problem. So I think going through that process and then working through it, and knowing that probably for 80, maybe 60 to 80% of the time, it had an element of pain associated with it. But then when it did work and it switched around and we started sort of proceeding through that journey, I was like, oh wow, like that was actually amazing going through that process. And then, you know, like even the admiration of watching Chantel sort of go through that process as well and work through it. I think it was one that just shifted, you know, the perspective on it. And then obviously, luckily enough, ended up with our first child, Marcel, and then it sort of shifts over, you know, and it's like, oh wow, it starts into a whole different set of, in quotation marks, problems, right? Because now you've gone from trying to conceive and having a kid to now raising one and figuring that out. So another evolution of it, but I think kids are always a pretty good one. There's probably a few that exist even in the business world. I think the business world's great for it. And just something that I've learned over the last 8 years at different parts of the journey, where you always hit a plateau point and you try a certain series of moves and actions, and you've got, you know, your team that are working on certain sort of projects, call it, and we've had it at multiple times. Like I remember we started off, like my business Future Golf, we started off as Gen Y Golf. In the first 4 years, we were based in one state, and we just got trapped at this sort of number where we couldn't break that in terms of members. It was maybe like 600-700 members from memory, something like that. And it felt so unsolvable at the time. You know, there was moments there where there was 3-4 of us sitting there at the pub and we're just like, oh, we can't service these amount of members that we've got. We can't get any more members. We can't get any more partners. We don't know what to do. And then slowly we started working through the problem solving approach for that. And that eventually led to us rebranding, getting a marketing agency in, getting some more team members in, going out to other experts that had walked the path and sort of taken that step from where we were to the next stage that we wanted to head into. And all of a sudden, it just something that, again, just felt really unsolvable and that had plateaued for maybe a year or so. It just changes significantly, and then you start seeing a whole different world that opens up on the other side, and then it comes with its own set of problems, and that's that iteration process, I think.
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing. And I think what's interesting with both those problems that you've shared, they ended up being problems that were worthwhile solving, right?
Yep.
And I think it brings to mind, and it brings front of mind now. Well, then the question is, there are problems worth solving, and then there are problems not worth solving. And in problem solving itself, the process of solving problems is suffering. You suffer. It's hard. It's hard to solve that business problem. It's hard to go through IVF. It's hard to be the only one in your circle doing it. And as a result, you suffer. And another interesting point in the book as well that Mark talks about is that, well, you should choose where you're suffering, right? Which means also you should choose the problems worth solving.
Yep.
Whereas I think when we put no conscious thought to this, you end up trying to solve silly problems that are not worth your time. And these silly problems will just open you up to a new world of silly problems. It's funny because this book, talking about it to you now, makes me want to just sit for an hour and audit all the current problems that I'm trying to solve in my life. To just, again, do another quick check of just a quick self-awareness process of going, well, is it worth me trying to solve all these problems here? Should I prioritize? Is there an 80-20 situation with the problems that I currently have in my business, in my personal life, etc.? That's a really cool way to look at it because, like you said right at the beginning of this section, disappointment panda, also aligned with Buddhism, funny enough. Life is suffering. I mean, it is. You go from one type of suffering to another. It's just choose what you're going to suffer for.
Yep. And it's also, as you were saying that, got me thinking about ways that, because we're using words like suffering and problem, right? And I think it's nearly like, you know, when the word like ego and stuff's used as well, it's got this negative type of connotation. Whereas the way that I look at both, say, problems and suffering, I'd nearly look at it as that's the journey or that's part of the path. Like if you're going to engage in moving forward or progress, right? Like putting label, like to me, like whether it's labeling it as suffering or problem solving or whatever it is, realistically, it's a series of decisions, choices, actions that take place based on our values and our beliefs, desires, objectives, goals, whatever that looks like. If we're engaging, you know, and call it reality or this version of the world that we're a part of. And I think that, and I think Mark talks about this in the book too, is that one of the things that's very liberating, or a couple of the moves that's super liberating, is just when you take ownership and acceptance of those things. Because it's when, like even as when I was telling the IVF story, like if I now look back on me 10 years ago when I was 26 going through that process, there's probably a few little mindset shifts where, you know, you remove the victimhood mentality or why is this happening to us? Things like there was certain components that existed in that process and journey that I feel if would have known a little bit differently, we could have approached it a little bit differently too, just to change the nature of that journey. And I think if I look back on it, we did pretty well. Like our state of mind and all that was relatively solid. But again, there was a few bits and pieces that probably just didn't help the process anyway, because the reality of the process was going to play out as it was. It was largely outside of our control, right?
How would you have approached it differently?
I think more just around just the weight of wanting the outcome so badly, and some of probably the emotional narratives that we had around that at times, where it was like, oh, you know, we're going to get too old before we have kids. Like, did we make the right choices? You know, like with our, you know, with the way that we're eating and our lifestyle at the moment. Like, why is everyone else in our family having kids? Like, you know, from one look at each other, and we've got to go through this 3-year process and find money for IVF and find these doctors and, you know, go and do tests, and Chantal has to do injections and have surgery and like all these other bits and pieces. Like, I think that notion of just accepting that, okay, this is part of our path and our journey. Let's just really lock in and embrace it. But I think that natural side of the why is this happening?
And a lot of what you just said was comparison.
Yeah. Heaps.
So many of the sentences you just dispensed were about comparison. Yep. Why is this person, the other person, this person, the other person? There was a lot of comparison there too.
Yep. It's probably that mixture, right, of victimhood, of comparison, the natural fear of not getting the outcome, uncertainty, like all those things, anxiety that would then sneak in. And I think it's just sort of bringing a little bit of different awareness to that process. It's the same with business. I think when we have high levels of uncertainty, then disappointment panda can have a really good run at you. You know, if you let that door open up, whereas the reality is that like there's not many, call it even problems or situations that don't have a variety of different solutions. It's just sometimes we can't see them straight away. And then we get comfort, I think, as we start speaking to experts and we get given new knowledge, new insight. We take a few actions, we make a few moves in that progress. All of a sudden, that sort of disappointment panda can sort of subside a little bit, and then you start feeling a high degree of comfort, whether that's real or not.
It still just makes me think of the beginning of this topic as we talked about it, in terms of you seem to be very aware of which problems to solve and which problems to leave. Right? Because I don't, you know, knowing you now for the years we've known each other, I don't really find you solving problems that lead you to worse problems. I find you tend to solve problems that lead you to better problems. Right? We all have problems, but it leads you to better problems. How are you able to determine whether, like, do you have some kind of framework when you encounter a problem where you go, do I leave it? Do I deal with it? Do I, you know, like, what kind of process do you have?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's probably a combination. Like, I generally operate off some type of, call it strategy or vision for the most part. You know, it's pretty open. Like, it's not a very strict plan or like, oh, I'm going to do this, and this. It's not like that. But I've probably got like goalposts that I'm pretty clear on, that do align with my value system and beliefs and what interests me, and a few of the other things that we've spoken about over the years. And that provides me with pretty good foundational parameters to make decisions and choices and to allocate bandwidth in, right? So there was a time probably 5-6 years ago where I was throwing a lot more darts, and I'd try a lot of really different things just to sort of find what it is that I enjoyed and bring that. And I think I just got a lot of those iterations in at a relatively young age, which also helps now with that clarity. So I think as we get older as well, you start getting a little bit more clear on, you know, what is it that makes you feel good? What do you actually enjoy? What's moving you towards where you want to go? What sort of experiences do you want to then have and interaction? So I think I've got that relatively solid in terms of helping me with making those decisions. So when I do make the missteps, I can correct them pretty quickly and get back on track. But in saying that, there's still lots of times where it never stays in a perfect spot, if that makes sense. Like, if you're looking for perfection in that process of finding better problems, and look, I'll say it openly, I think I've put in way more time and effort than most people reasonably would in trying to figure that if there is a one type of approach to sort that out, and I still haven't found it. You know, like even now, I often just think, I'm like, is it you know, we always talk about is there more freedom and peace, like in just being the Buddhist monk type of approach and letting go of all attachment to material things and your projects and the things that you attach your identity to? Or is it better to go all in on some of those things and create new worlds and experiences? Like, still always battling with those questions too. Did I answer your question? I don't know if I did.
Just on that point. Well, no, you didn't. And that's okay. But just quickly on that point to round it out, some extra wisdom that and whether it's wisdom or stupidity, it's yet to be labeled. But I think at different stages of life, it requires us to be a different person with a different set of values and a different set of priorities, obviously, right? And whether you become full monk-like or fully attached to the game and fully attached to materialism, etc., it just really depends on what stage of life you're at and what you're trying to achieve and what goals you want and what values you have. So it's the more and more we go down this path of learning and growing, the more I'm realizing that it's the same ingredients. It tends to be the same ingredients that makes us all feel a certain way or happy. However, the recipe for all of us is going to be different.
Yep.
Right. It tends to be similar ingredients. And I think the mistake that sometimes we can make is that we think it's same ingredients and the same recipe. Whereas I'm starting to understand now, because, you know, as we read all these different books, brother, what's really interesting is we're starting to say things like, yeah, man, I've heard this so many times before. Oh, yeah, I've heard this before. Yeah. It's the same thing as this book, same thing as that book. And I think what that tells us is that the ingredients are all the same, but the recipe, it's different for all of us.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like, one of the analogies that I use often is the chessboard's always moving. You know what I mean? Like, I think we always want like a really strict formula. You probably get it all the time. It's like, hey, Vin, give me the 5 steps to become a world-class keynote speaker, right?
That's right.
Now, that's great, but your mix of timing and opportunity and how early you started and the reps that you've already put in, like, it's all these things to actually get that outcome are going to be very different. Like, you can give people your 5-step process and it will be genuine and you'll share with them every bit of knowledge that you knew, but the world just might have changed a little bit and moved off that needle where that same formula won't work again. And I think, just as you were saying that, one of the things that I think I do a lot of, and even I know you now do a lot of, it's getting balcony level views of everything that's going on in the world that you can kind of control. You know, I think that helps a lot. And what I mean by that is, when you think about how even businesses do strategy, they start with a vision. They generally have a few key objectives. They've got their values and the culture and their mission and what they're about, what they plan to kind of do in the next 2 to 3 years. I think that's a process that we can all use in our lives as well, that help with making choices on how to get the knowledge that you need, get the people that you need around you, make the choices and allocate resources, whether that's your own time and money, resources, and then also capitalize on opportunities as they come up. Because there's been so many times, even in my life, where I've had a plan and I've wanted to pursue a project or try to solve a problem, but just the timing wasn't right. You know, and getting that timing is something that requires a lot of nuance, you know, and I always say, like, it's that mixture of like timing, opportunity, and action, where finding that is really key. And it's hard to do. It's really, really hard to do in alignment with who you are and what you have around you to execute on it as well. And we see like a few people that are able to do that consistently and over again, but it's really, really rare, I think. But that to me feels like the underlying formula.
You just sent me a text last night. Yesterday we did like a 3-hour call on both of us looking at the bird's eye view of our business and our lives. And we're just starting to notice, I mean, especially in my situation, where there are so many opportunities coming up now that it becomes difficult to, like, it truly becomes difficult, because I'm sitting here going, which problem should I focus on, right? Which opportunity should I try to grasp? Which one first? You know, and it becomes this, it really is an overwhelming exercise, because you go, right. For example, I had a publisher reach out for a publishing deal, and it's like, is now the right timing though? Right? Because I've got so much going on. Is now the time to take this? Because it's funny, you could do the right thing at the wrong time and then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll never know, that's the other thing with this game is like, there's no way to validate in life that we know of yet, where you can simulate the different paths that you choose on. So that's why you've just kind of got to make a decision. And then that's where I think emotion and that intuition and that gut feel comes in a little bit, where it's like, okay, I'm going to go down this path, but I'm comfortable with it regardless of how it plays out, because that's what I've chosen at the moment. And if I don't get the validation, or it's as I start embarking on this journey, if it's just really not feeling good, and building that sensitivity to, is this something that I want to keep solving, right? Like we used the IVF example before, or the business example, like it'll organically nearly play out how it's meant to, because based on those circumstances and just what's sort of available to you, generally as humans, we'll pick the things that are going to take us to that goal to the best of our ability, right? Like it's very rare that we don't utilize what we have at our disposal, unless our goal is to really like self-sabotage whatever it is that we're trying to do. But I think a lot of that happens pretty subconsciously, where you can figure it out, but having that balcony view just gives you a lot more clarity around what the options are and how to make those decisions. Like even when we went through some of your stuff yesterday, like you're at the point now where you've just got to make like 3 to 5 probably pretty significant decisions, and it changes the whole trajectory of some of the stuff that you're doing. But finding what those 3 to 5 are from 25 really good options, that's your challenging bit, because you don't have really any, like, call it traditional low-hanging fruit problems that you just need to solve. Yours are at the moment mainly opportunities, whereas 2-3 years ago you had different types of problems that just had to be solved, because that opportunity timing combo was very different to what it is right now.
Yeah, and I think part of the way, one of the solutions, especially if you're listening to this and you're going through a difficult time and you've got lots of opportunities or you've got lots of options in front of you, I think this is where you have to have the awareness to go, all right, so this is clearly a level 5 thinking activity. I need to sit down. I'm not just going to pick 5 out of the 25. I need to sit down and map these things out. And that's what I did yesterday, Ali. Like I mapped out everything on a piece of paper, then I had a 3-hour call with you to talk through each and every one of them. We rated each and every one of them in terms of how much energy it gives me, what kind of financial return does it give me, how much growth potential does it have, and we really mapped it out. And almost scientifically looked at the opportunities in front of us with all the data points that we have. And then that made the process way easier to be able to go, well, clearly this isn't a focus of mine anymore. Clearly that isn't a focus of mine anymore. But if you don't think at that level of depth, then it's very easy to make the wrong choice.
Yeah.
It's very easy to make the wrong choice. Yeah.
I used to get this asked by a couple of my, advisors over the time, because especially in the business world, like you'll have a priority list and in your head, they're all number 1 priorities, but then there's 15 of them. And then someone's like, well, you can't have 15 number 1 priorities. Like you've really got to order these and consistently start shifting them around. And that's again, very similar to the 5 whys. It's like, how do you just keep training yourself to keep reprioritizing and thinking at that level? Whereas I think we naturally just gravitate to doing, it's like reacting and doing, and you don't want to overthink it, right? Because there's people that probably go to the other scale where they just strategize so ridiculously well, but then never do anything. So you've got these amazing plans that don't get acted on.
That's the thing, is that more thinking just leads to more thinking. Action is what leads to clarity, not thinking.
It's a combo, right? It's like what we always say. It's a bit of both. It's finding that mix. And like right now in sort of our business world, we're playing a really, like the game's pretty intense. If I was going to use an analogy, it's like you've made the finals and we're now playing for a championship. And the game's a little bit different, and there's lots of moving parts and pieces. You've got limited resources. The speed that you require to do things is rapid. And then you have to connect all the dots. You've got to get new insight. You've got to keep increasing the intelligence of what you're doing. You've got to then make sure everyone's sort of aligned and, heading in the same direction. So it's like this complex, like the thing that I just keep looking at the moment, and even we did this yesterday, it's like you've got little matrices, and there's dots everywhere. It's that continuous process of just connecting the dots, reprioritizing them, ticking things off, seeing, all right, now that this has happened, what does it look like? And then going again and just reiterating that process over and over again.
And bringing it back to this book, I feel that everything we've said here, it's why this book is so important, and the message it shares and why it's important. It's because when you have no ducks left in your bag, you don't have the cognitive capacity to be able to think through these things with clarity, right? Because if you're giving ducks every moment of every day for silly things, then you no longer have the cognitive capacity and mental clarity to be able to push through and think deeply on these topics. You just don't, right? It's like how, you've just got to be super careful with how you spend your cognitive energy now.
Yep.
It's that mental drain. I mean, I speak to a lot of my friends often, and they say they just feel tired all the time. They're just always tired and always just feel depleted, and they don't feel rejuvenated. And I think a lot of the times it's because we're too busy solving problems that don't really matter to us, and we're giving ducks away for bloody anything.
Yep.
And I think it's that awareness. And I think just to move it on to the next point as well, it's not. I think the book title is a little bit misleading, in that it's this subtle art of not giving a duck, right? And it's not really about not caring about anything. It's really becoming really clear in your life about what you care about.
Yep.
And I think that's why we talk a lot, in our process, we call Recalibrate, where we do it once a year with our good friends, and we also do it for others as well. But we talk about having clarity on what your values are. That is another way of saying, what do you give a duck about?
Yep.
Right? And I think having that has been more important than ever for me while going through the process of what I'm doing, because it's helping me weed things out, weed certain problems out, weed certain opportunities out, because now I'm choosing where I place my ducks.
Yep, for sure. And I think just overall, like this book it helps with the self-awareness component a little bit. It gives you a different perspective on increasing that understanding of who you are and who you're about, which is pretty cool. And I think there's also a flip side to this and I remember speaking to, Dan, who's a big listener and, family to you, friend of mine. And he was also talking about the other side, from a psychological standpoint. Is some people, like, what do you then do if you have no ducks at the moment, or you have very limited ducks, because you can't even, you're not even at the point where there's any to give, right? And it's nearly working from the other way. And I think a lot of people are in this spot too, where the ducks are depleted, and, it requires like clinical help. It requires medication potentially. It requires certain things just to get to a level where you can operate at a cognitive level to make these types of decisions too. So I think it's having that understanding too, us not being medical professionals, that sometimes when we're talking about these things, we're talking about it from a very different position based on what we're doing in our lives. But then there's also a flip side where if you're feeling like, shit, I've got no ducks at the moment, what can I do? I think it's looking at that professional help and trying to embed that into your that might be the action that's taken, or the problem that gets solved. It's how do I just increase the baseline level of ducks that I have to actually give.
It's interesting you say that. When I was younger, when I see other people making decisions that I felt was foolish or wrong in my eyes, I used to be really, like, I used to, in my mind, almost attack them just in my mind. Just go, oh my God, as if that person's so stupid. As if they did that. That's so stupid. That's so silly, right? And it's funny, as you grow older, you learn a little more. And like Mark says in the book, I like it. You just go from being wrong when you're young to when you're older, you're just less wrong. And the more you learn, you just become less and less wrong, but you're still wrong. So I like that. So everything I know is wrong right now is just less wrong, hopefully.
For sure.
What I'm saying from that is I've learned that everyone is born with a different toolkit. And for some people, that decision they made that when I was younger, I perceived it to be really stupid. I have a lot more empathy for that now, because I just think to myself, wow, that person, maybe they were only born with a toolkit that has only allowed them to react in that way. Because I'm sure other people look at me with some of the decisions that I make and go, oh my God, Vin, you're so bloody stupid. But really, I've made those certain decisions in my life because I only have access to a certain number of tools. Until you go down the process of learning and getting help, like you said. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, oh, I've got no ducks, or I've got no tools, then I think it's about, I mean, in Australia, it's go to Bunnings, right? In America, it's go to Home Depot, and that's the psychologist, that's the psychiatrist potentially, or a counselor or someone to go get some extra tools, and there's no shame in that. Yeah, get more tools. And then as you have more tools, you're going to be able to build more things, fix more problems. You'll become more dynamic. And I think the message there is, it's okay if you don't have that many tools. The reason we created this podcast is in the hope that it inspires our children, first of all, to know that it's all right. Dad was stupid once. You heard it on the podcast. He was very wrong and had a hammer, and that's all he had, and everything was a nail. But then, Dad, a part of the process, went along and got more tools and read more books and learned, etc. And secondly, the priority or the vision for this podcast, I think, is to help inspire other people to go, hey, that sounds like a really cool tool. I'm going to go give it a crack, learn how to use it. And all of a sudden, they're going to find themselves be able to solve certain problems in their life and help other people as well. And that's how we can have our little bit of impact in the world.
For sure.
Yeah, I like that you called out that message. I just wanted to call that lesson out from the book as well. We go from being wrong to just less wrong.
Yeah. Oh, can you imagine when we look back on this thing in 20 years' time and how cringeworthy it's going to be? And we're like, oh my God, did we tell people that was something that we were doing at that period of time? How wrong were we?
That's making the assumption that we become less wrong. What if we become more wrong? And then we go, damn man, those guys are so smart. What if we just listen to what they say? Imagine it just goes full circle. We just start listening to our own podcast and
we're like, we were so much more intelligent,
so much smarter
in 2022. Now we're like, now it's like 2040, and I can't stand anything you say, Vin. It's so. When did you become so dumb?
Yeah, I know. Or maybe that's the path to enlightenment. Is that like smart is the dumb is the new smart, and smart is the new dumb.
Well, think about it, like, and we probably as a society don't do this enough. But when you speak to like a grandparent or somebody who's in their 80s, they just don't say that much. Like, I don't know if you've done this recently, but I've done it with like Chantel's like grandma and like a few other people. And you ask like some questions to try to see if there's like some secret nuggets, in the sauce or whatever it looks like. And the answer's always just so like simple. And like, this is somebody that's seen such a broad spectrum of life over a 80, 85 year period, who has a very high level of wisdom and insight and thought. And a lot of the times it's just like, I'm like, what do you think about? He says, just a few memories and like hanging out with, family and the grandkids. And it's just, everything's just so like, it's not overthought. It's not over theorized. Right. There's nothing complex there. It's not like there's a 10-step formula to go and do these things to get to this point. It's just like,
do you think we'll be that? Do you think we'll be that when our grandkids one day ask us, hey, Grandpa, what's the meaning of life? I feel like you and I would just immediately move into a 3-hour podcast with them.
I feel like I'm more likely. I think you're less likely. I think you'll always have like, you'll be like, sit down, I've got a story for you, young chap. Yeah. And then like 5 hours later, there'll be like a mini novella of your top 55 stories and experiences over the last 40 years.
Hey, but I would deliver it with intensity and
you'd be amazing.
Drama.
You'll be amazing. Like, I'm not saying it's good. I never said they're going to be shit stories. I'm like, they're going to be, I'll be there. I'll be like, I've heard this one 50 times, but I'm still going to listen.
Maybe
he does it well.
This time.
It's funny though. Like I was listening to us. We're on a different podcast the other day that got released, and I was listening back to it. I don't usually listen to us, but I had to listen to this one, and again, I just found myself like being a fan, not of me, but like of the conversation and the stories that you were sharing. So I don't know, there might be something there where the stuff you do holds up, my friend.
Not to take away from the message you're trying to share there, and it's that, and I think it tends to be true. I mean, this is a pretty big blanket statement. However, as you speak to people who are older and have more experience in life and have been through more, at the end of the journey, things are just very simple. You know, I want to be around the people that I love. I want to spend time with people that I love. I want to eat good food. And it's very simple, you know. I want to reminisce on some nice memories. You know, it's not overly complex. Whereas right now, you know, you and I were in our mid-30s and moved past our mid-30s now, and you know, moving on to 40. I mean, holy shit, dude. Last night I was talking to Pei Wen, and Pei Wen, for those new listeners, that's my wife. And when I saw her, Pei Wen, it was interesting in that I said to her, hey, you know, one of the big rules of wealth in our life, in life, is that we should live below our means. And, you know, we were considering buying a place, etc. A problem, right? Should we solve this problem? And in the end, we talked through and we said, you know what? One of the big rules in wealth is we should live below our means. Let's not do it. Because if we do that, then it opens up a new can of worms, new problems, etc. We don't really want to solve those type of problems right now. And then I said to her, let's wait 10 years. And then when I said that, she paused for a second and she goes, oh my God, in 10 years, we're going to be in our mid to late 40s. And I don't know, that when she said that this time to me, it hit me different, bro. It hit me. A duck was definitely given during that conversation. Right? There was a duck that I handed over to her. You know, I definitely handed over my last remaining duck that evening.
There's a few ducks in this one.
Yeah, there was. And I just went, oh, damn. In 10 years, I want to be mid to late 40s. And I don't know, it scared me in a way that hasn't scared me like before. It's really weird.
This might be a 5Y one to go down the layers of it.
I think it's a 5Y one. But more than this, to be vulnerable with our listeners here, I had a really weird experience late last week at about 2 a.m. in the morning. Okay. So what happened was, woke up from my sleep and just jolted up and then went to the bathroom, number one. So I was taking a pee. And then while I was peeing, I was slowly blacking out.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And that freaked me out because I'm like, oh my God, I'm midstream. I think I'll pass out. And it took, like, I started while peeing, trying to take deep breaths, Wim Hofing and everything. But literally, my eyes were like, it was like I could see, but then it was like a dark thing that's slowly closing my eyesight. And this is the closest I've ever been to fainting in my life. I've never fainted before in my life. And I was like, I think I'm fainting. And then I do this little like wheezily call out to Pei Wen. Like I was trying to call out to Pei Wen, and it just sounded like this wimpish cry. Yeah. And she didn't wake up at all. And then I managed to finish peeing, quickly turn around, sit on the toilet, and I was okay. But that really freaked me out. That really freaked me out because that's never happened in my life before. And that to me, I think, and I'm connecting it to what I said before, you know, late 30s now. I'm having problems in my life now that I've never had before. And there are also a lot of ducks given here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just thought I'd share that.
So what did that like scare you about age or like your health or
dying? Yeah, definitely, dude. And then immediately that day, that's why I canceled the podcast with you for that reason. And my wife and I also go through IVF as well. And then immediately ducks were given there, needed to solve the problem, got 5 tubes of blood taken from me. And now awaiting results, and then going to go check to see if anything's wrong, for example. Yeah. Hopefully this is a free scare, and you know, oh, nothing's wrong, Vin. This just this happens, and you know, maybe it's just pressure and flow or whatever. I don't know. I'm going to find out. But to me, it's like in life, every now and then we get little scares like this that come along that are important for us to give some ducks about. It's easy to ignore some of these. I think as men, I think women are a lot better than this than men. I think a lot of men, we go, it's fine. I probably just stopped too quickly or whatever. And we don't check these things that can, you know, so I brought it up because That's a situation that came out of the blue, and I decided to give this 20 ducks. Oh, almost swore. So I gave it 20 ducks, and I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm very proactive now, and I'm looking at what vitamins I'm deficient in. I'm checking my testosterone levels. I'm checking everything. I'm doing the full gamut, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think we get many free reminders in life.
Yeah.
I don't think they come often, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's just a quick call out to the boys and the men out there who, a bit too macho, a bit too, I don't need to get that checked out. I just walk it off. Hey, if something's going on, get it checked out. Just give some ducks and go get it checked out, especially if you're, in your late 30s and moving into your 40s.
And again, I think it's
I don't know why I'm talking about that. Yeah, that's just a PSA.
But I think it's really cool, though, that you had the awareness to not just brush that under the carpet. Because even as you were telling me that story,
wanted to, though. I really
like, I'm
wanted
just
to
like,
do it.
oh, yeah, you just woke up. You're probably a bit lightheaded, and it's weird that you nearly passed out. But this is more like a funny. I'm like, this is more like a funny story until you started saying that. Oh yeah, then I actually went and I got like blood tests and got it checked out. I'm like, I wasn't really taking the seriousness of the health ramifications here because
I really wanted to just brush it off. I really wanted to, man, because I wanted to do the whole. I'm still young. It's nothing wrong. But then again, and the reason I'm bringing it up while we're talking about this book is that again, there are things worth giving ducks for
sure,
right? And there are some things you should overinvest and give more ducks than you think you should. So I think again, it comes back to that assessment. It's such a powerful assessment to do, just to say you're going through a week. I mean, I love how you always make things pragmatic, and you've kind of embedded that behavior into me as well now. Every time I learn something new, I'm like, okay, how can I pragmatically apply it straight away? And it's that I reckon for the next week or so, I'm just going to really note in my journal, what are the key things I'm giving ducks about? And I'm just going to reassess, am I doing it effectively? Am I placing them in the right place? Are there places where I should be giving more ducks? Are there places where I should really be not giving any ducks at all? It's like that scammer in my life, right? It's like, should I be giving any ducks on that? About that? I mean, really? Should I? So again, it's really making me reflect a lot, which I think, it's a good thing.
I love it. I think that's really cool. No, that's an awesome share.
What else is on your notes there that you've taken?
I think I've spoken to a few people about this one. This one really stood out for me, and it probably ties into what you said earlier in the episode about the Beatles guy who really just wanted fame. It's when you're going down this path, like most people generally just gravitate to the outcome, and I think one of the examples used there was, I think Mark shares the example where he's like, there was a 10, 15-year period where he wanted to be a musician. And he's like, but when he actually broke it down, what he also wanted was he just wanted the fame. He wanted a couple of like the outcomes that are associated with that. But when he broke it down, he didn't actually love the process of being a musician. Like he wasn't sitting there. He wanted to solve the problem. He wasn't playing guitar 8 hours a day and, actually embedding into the process. So that got me just thinking a little bit more around when you're going back to problems that you need to solve. But what processes do you actually love? And this is a frame that I've never really looked at my actions with for a pretty long time. Like, okay, like we take actions on a daily basis and got strategies and plans and pretty refined and track a lot of things and review them. But really breaking it down to not only, okay, what problems do I need to solve, but what processes do I actually really love and am I good at executing on, right? And most people, and he shares this, they just love the outcome more than the process. So, and that's why the result isn't usually achieved. So for me, say in the business world, it started getting me thinking, it's like, okay, over like a 10, 15 year period, the things that I actually love from a process perspective is I love constructing deals and partnerships that have a really large amount of value in them, right? Like that's a process that it's something that I really enjoy. I enjoy structuring. I love meeting people. I love trying to find out if there's a mutual exchange of value that's possible and then putting together something that works for everyone, right? Like and I think it's also looking at which processes have you actually executed on that align with this and add value to or fit with your sort of mix. So that was one that I found. I think the other one that I found was just, I love trying to extract knowledge, whether it's from books or information sources or analyzing data or speaking to people, and then applying that knowledge in different ways. And then I love strategy. I love the notion of imagining something and then trying to build a framework so that there's a pathway of possibility for something that didn't really exist before. So I started getting a little bit more like deeper levels of clarity, and I needed this reminder, especially for the game that I'm playing at the moment. It's like, okay, well, what are some of these checkpoints and processes that I actually really love? And then what are some of the processes that I'm engaging with right now where I'm probably not really that suited from a process perspective? Like, one of the things that I'm really bad at is day-to-day management and maintenance. I'm horrible at that. I've always been really bad at it. Like, there's never been a time in my career where I could consistently do something for like 5 days straight and follow up and just, water that garden, call it as the metaphor. Like, I always need variety. I need something new, need something sort of progressing like that. So I started realizing that every time I have to dabble for a longer period of time into, call it more like operational type of management and follow up on things and stuff like that, I'm probably going to sell everyone a little bit short on that side. So it's trying to get that clarity and finding greater awareness into the processes rather than even just the actions or the problems or the strategy and a few of the values. It's like, okay, well, yeah, what does that look like?
And that makes a lot of sense, because if you're enjoying the process, what that means is you're probably good at it.
Yeah.
Right? Because the things we're good at, we enjoy. Yeah. It's like if you're good at driving, you probably enjoy driving. If you're good at a certain game, you enjoy it more. If you suck at something, you're not going to enjoy it. And I think there's a benefit in enjoying the process, because the benefit there is you do it better, and the people who reap the rewards from the process will benefit, right? And I think having awareness on that is really important. I think the big problem is for a lot of entrepreneurs, right? I mean, people who have a job, it's different, because your job may have 4 different responsibilities or maybe 5, right? But as an entrepreneur, you've got 20 different responsibilities. Especially if you're a solo entrepreneur, then far out, you're the head of marketing, you're the person who executes the marketing, you strategize the marketing, let alone you do the bookkeeping, you do the finances, you keep all the receipts. Like, you're doing everything. You're doing the delivery of the service, you're doing it all. And I think the danger in that is the more processes that you have in your life personally or professionally, the more aware you need to become slowly, gradually, of which process brings more enjoyment, and lean more towards those. Interesting. I'll tell you this. I met a magician years ago when I first started magic, and I was really inspired by him. A local guy, his name's Shahin. And Shahin would just perform incredible magic that just was beautiful and effortless. And I remember going up to him and asking him, dude, how many hours do you practice a day? And he'd say to me, oh, bro, I practice maybe 4 or 5 hours a day after school. I went, yeah, man, I do that too, but I can't do that. Right. And I go, like, what do you think it is that makes you so like amazing at the magic? And he goes, oh, and the kind of magic he was doing was sleight of hand. And he goes, oh, sleight of hand just kind of comes naturally or easy to me. And he didn't really know how to explain it. And then what's really interesting as well is I had someone at my workshop maybe 6 months ago ask me something similar, where he also runs workshops and he's a facilitator and he's a speaker. And he came up to me and he goes, dude, how do you facilitate at this level? Like, how are you able to craft these experiences? How often do you spend planning? And I go, oh man, when I'm active on it, maybe 6-7 hours a day. And he goes, I do more than that, but how come you're able to do it? And I go, oh, we kind of comes naturally. And then that's when I caught myself saying the same damn thing that I remember Shahin saying. And in that split second, in that moment, it made me really think. When we think about the processes that we're doing in our lives, if you lean into the processes that A, you are enjoying more, but B, that you're naturally kind of good at, if you lean into those a little harder than you are currently, I feel like that's the answer to achieving more in your life and having more impact. Yep. It's when we are leaning into the processes where we dread, you're not good at, it doesn't come naturally, nor does it come easily to you. And you keep leaning into those, that's where you start to dread life. That's where you start to dread going into work. It's where then it bleeds over into your personal life and you're unhappy.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
And I think all of us, like there'll be a thread throughout life where there'll be certain processes that we're still good at, say, as a 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old, that probably we started building that muscle when we were 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years old. You know, and there's just this foundational repetition or whatever, for whatever reason, it's something that is more just naturally existent within us. And then there's others that we develop over time as well. And I think that awareness of what that combination looks like is something that can be really, really helpful, because even when you think about the professional world, like at the moment, when we hire for jobs and when people apply for jobs or they go down a business path, they're very structured type of roles, right? Like we talk about these are the responsibilities that you'll have. This is what the role will look like day to day. But I think really focusing and then we interview the person and they tell us what they're good at and some of the achievements and outcomes and the places that worked at. But realistically, the more and more I started thinking about it, it's like to effectively hire, you want to see what processes are people really good at. Like what's that person's superpower from a process perspective that they can do. Now, for some people, it might be management, it might be leadership, it might be just execution, it might be problem solving, it might be project management, like whatever it is, right? It might be you've got a technical skill, you're just really reliable, like you never miss a day of work. Like there's all these different sort of skill sets and processes that we build up that probably naturally exist. And then there's that 20, 30, 40% that sit outside of that for room for development and creativity and growth as well. But it just got me really thinking differently about, even as I continue to build out certain things in all parts of life, it's like, all right, well, what process does this relate to? Like, what does this, even in personal lives, right? Like, what processes does Chantel enjoy that we can amplify a little bit more? What processes do the kids like already that they really enjoy, rather than thinking about like it from an activity perspective or something? There's something there to play around with that's pretty cool around processes.
I can give you an example right now as well. It's been crazy in this last year. My social media has been going crazy, right? I mean, at the time of us recording this podcast, we're sitting at over 600,000 people on Instagram, 600,000 people on TikTok, etc.
It's nuts.
I've never had this kind of growth in my social media before, which has presented a certain number of problems that I've never experienced before. And one of the processes that started to come up is the process of dealing with brands, because I can't believe it, Ali. I think I've made it. I've become an influencer. And brands now want to work with me, but I don't enjoy the process of navigating the deals. So I immediately started to recognize that in the last few weeks and thought to myself, I need to reach out to an agency that helps influencers manage the collaboration with brands, because I do not enjoy that process, nor am I good at it. Whereas I can tell you my initial reaction was, I'm going to do this because it was new, it was fresh, it seemed exciting. And I immediately was going to go down that, I think it's the entrepreneurial problem of wanting to be in control of everything. And I wanted to deep dive into that. I already bought an ebook on how to work with brands from step one all the way to the delivery of the creative. And I was about to read it. And then I stopped myself and I thought to myself, hang on a second, why am I doing this? What the hell am I doing? I don't know how to manage. I don't know how to manage this influencer side of the business, nor do I have any ducks left at the moment, because if I sink 4 ducks into that, I'm not going to even be able to look at this book deal, etc. Right? So it's been interesting in recognizing which processes do I absolutely suck at and just making the vow not to touch them.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And I think that's the other really cool part too, that in life is like, we've got the processes that we love, and then we're also going to need, in the worlds that we operate in, we're going to need people that love other processes that we also need in that ecosystem. And I think that's where we're hiring and building a team and having a good network of friends and family really plays a role. Like even when you think about raising kids and all that, when you have that village or that tribe around you, the beauty in that is that there's multiple people looking after multiple processes that are required. Whereas probably in the Western world now, it's like parents, you look after the entire set of the process, and good luck to you. Like, we've probably gotten a little bit more separated. When I look back when we had kids as well, one of the best things that we ever did was my mother-in-law lived with us throughout that period. And the amount of stuff that my mother-in-law would look after for us when we needed it, I feel like we got, like, that journey of early parenthood for us was just so much, I think, more enjoyable just because there was more support there.
You played that game on medium instead of playing it on hard, right? You got to play it on medium, right? Whereas most of us are playing on extreme, and we keep fucking dying. There was. You didn't die once in that game. You just played it on medium, got shot 100 times, and survived.
Yeah, I think I got I personally definitely got off. I think pretty light. I think Chantal was still playing it on a very high level of difficulty. And then I had reinforcements with my mother-in-law. She was I'm even going to claim that she was more on my team than Chantal's. We were working together on one side of the battle, and Chantal was looking after a really core part of that journey. But I'm going to get in trouble for this. I know I'm going to get in trouble for this one. We're gonna cut this one out. You didn't save me. You did not save me. You just let me. Oh shit.
Yeah, there are some things I won't give a duck about, and that was one of them. There's a passage I'm going to read, because after this passage, I wrote the following notes. I went, well, that's bloody depressing. ... So I want to read this out to you, because this clearly is something I either do not agree with or something that I'm a little unsure on, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. The section reads, the ticket to emotional health, like that to physical health, comes from eating veggies. That is, accepting the bland and the mundane truths of life. Truths such as your actions actually don't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. And the vast majority of your life will be boring and not noteworthy. And that's okay. This is vegetable, and it's going to taste bad at first, very bad. You will avoid accepting it, but once ingested, your body will wake up feeling more potent and more alive. After all, the constant pressure to be something amazing, to be the next big thing, will be lifted off your back. The stress and anxiety of always feeling inadequate and constantly needing to prove yourself will dissipate. And the knowledge and acceptance of your own mundane existence will actually free you to accomplish what you truly wish. And I remember reading that bit and going, oh, that just, I hate eating vegetables. I do eat vegetables. I don't like it. And this one, when I read it, it obviously impacted me in I wouldn't say a negative way. It's just kind of that resistance to eating spinach and broccoli. It's just kind of does life really have to? I mean, do I really not matter? Is my wife really? Most of my life really going to be boring?
But I've got 600,000 followers. Surely I matter. Why are you saying this, Mark? Why are you finally mattered, and now you're saying I don't matter?
600,000 followers on Instagram, Mark. I'm going to check right now. I'm actually going to I'm going to look right now. Because I am a loser, and I just want to know now.
He just doesn't understand what that feels like.
I'm going to look, Mark Manson. To hear you, Mark Manson. You got 1 million. He's got 1 million. He's better than me. I am mundane. I am not noteworthy. I'm never going to do anything great. Mark's better than me. I'm a loser. Okay, let's move on. But again, that little pat. Damn it, he's got 1 million. That's going to bother me now. But the thing is, right. I hope I don't care as much as I sounded like I cared. I read that passage because I think I always have the mindset. That I want life to be exciting. I want life to be not boring, which leads to another point in the book where you're not meant to feel happy all the ducking time, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I have that. I think I elude myself into thinking I should be happy all the time. And reading this book, that sentence stuck out more than ever. This passage stuck out more than ever. Whereas before I read it through and I didn't even acknowledge it really because I didn't think much of this. And last week I felt a little bit of burnout. I've done some terrible things in terms of I worked really hard, then I structured a holiday, and then in the middle of my holiday, I flew to London for work for 4 days, and then I flew back to Singapore, took some work meetings. It wasn't a holiday for me. So I went from hard work to a fake holiday, and then worked even harder, and then came back to hard work again. So I burnt myself out. And in the moments where I woke up that week, last week, and I kind of went, oh man, I feel kind of shitty. Waking up and nearly fainting while you're peeing, and I just felt overall just like, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm such a loser now. And then when I was going through that, and I read this book, and that passage was top of mind, it really made me feel better, because I gave myself permission to not have to feel happy that week, to not have to feel high energy that week, to not have to be inspiring that week. I canceled things with you. I had to cancel things with Craig, my videographer. I had to cancel things with a lot of people, but I canceled everything and took time to just rest, and took that week to not really particularly feel happy. And it's funny because this is just a book. I don't even bloody know Mark, but his book and his words gave me permission that week to not seek happiness. And it was really nice. It was really nice, even in my journal, to write, all right, well, I'm just gonna sit in this one for a bit and just take it. I'm just gonna take a beat. It's all good. Whereas my brain started going, all right, Vin, let's go down to the range, let's go do archery, man. All right, let's get on that bike, and let's do 30 minutes of this and that. And I just went, no, I'm just gonna sit on the couch and watch House of Dragons. and that felt good.
Yep.
I think that relentless desire for feeling good and feeling happy is a bit of a trap. It's why he's giving us that medicine with that passage there of, it's okay if some of your life is boring, or most of your life, which he says here is going to be boring. I don't like that bit still, but yeah.
I think there's a big pressure if you're someone who's quite productive too.
Yeah. Yep.
To turn that machine off. Because if you think about it, it's probably that engine's been running for a very long time. So it's very counterintuitive to do that. Like I told you this, recently I did a silent meditation retreat for 3 days.
About that. Yeah, tell us about it.
So this is like a 3-day version of this experience. I think they do like 10-day versions, which is like the ultra marathon version of silent meditation. And then some people do months. And so it was really cool. There was this place in Hillsville, not too far away in Victoria. There's about 25 other people there. And it's just super simple. Like you rock up to this place, you get a really basic room. You have dinner together where you have a little chat. And then pretty much from that meal onwards, it's silence. So the routine is like you kind of sit and meditate for an hour and a half, and then have some food, go for a walk, come back, meditate for another 2-3 hours, have a walk, eat a little bit of food, come back and meditate for 2-3 hours, go to sleep, and then you just keep rinse and repeating that process.
Are you allowed to write? Are you allowed to write stuff?
Yeah, so this one's pretty loose.
Okay.
So you can write, you can bring a book. I think there's other more intense versions where it's literally nothing.
Can you listen to a podcast? Can you listen to stuff?
Like he kind of had relatively loose rules, but most people didn't have their phone. At most, I had a book, like a physical book and a journal maybe. And then the rest is like you can go for a walk or, do a few other bits and pieces. But it's funny though, after depending on how active your mind is, I think for most people after sort of day one of this, like all of a sudden that monkey mind that's running and operating and telling you we should do this and check this and do all of that, it just all dissolves and disappears. So I couldn't think of a time where for a 3-day period I couldn't remember a time where I didn't check my phone for that amount of time, or log into something, or have to, check Gmail or whatever it is. And just that freedom from the apps, just on a real simple level, the apps and the phone and the level of stimulus that comes through that. It was amazing how liberating just that was.
No ducks were given to the phone. No ducks were given to the phone.
The phone got 0 ducks. And then the other part that's really crazy with it is just where your mind then goes, like just how simple and basic the thoughts are that you're then left with after a day or two. Like once everything's sort of been processed and like in journaling and stuff. Like it was funny because then every night people could do a share if they wanted to. And it was hilarious. Some of the things that people were sharing, like they're like, yeah, I think I probably spent like 10 minutes weighing up whether I was going to have a second serving of the apple crumble at dinner. You know, or like it's these types of decisions. Or like I spent like 40 minutes just thinking about that bird that was making a noise outside, right? Because you've got such a little stimulus that your brain just goes down to this level of like, well, there's just not that much happening for a lot of people.
It's what happens when you have all your ducks and there's nothing to give ducks about. Like that, like I guess the silent meditation is such a powerful experiment in what if I left you with all of your ducks every day for 3 days?
Yeah.
What would you do if you gave no ducks away for 3 days? That's a fascinating. Tell us more. So the thoughts became really simple. Ice cream scoops, birds making noises. What else?
Yeah, so like this first, and I think that was for some people, right? For some people, the thoughts became really simple. For others, like a real key situation or thought would become very amplified, but to the point where like there was a couple of people that shared that, okay, well, I've now just got a lot of clarity on this situation that I now need to go back and solve at the end of this. And I've been thinking about it, nearly that one thing for 3 days, and that's the thing that just keeps running through my mind. For others, it was just really overwhelming and their thoughts, because ultimately, especially the meditation component, like you're pretty much just sitting, like at the core of that type of meditation is you're just sitting there silently and you have no distractions, right? So ultimately you have to sit there with your own mind and see how it plays out. So I think for a lot of people that maybe were experiencing a few different things, just that level of discomfort of just sitting there and letting everything else go was really difficult, to the point where, like, funnily enough, like some people feel like they've got a knife getting stabbed in their back. Some people like get really like emotional and are crying, and some people just leave. Like, so there's a bit of a variety of, I think, how people experience it, but that's really, that's very rare. Like, say out of the 25 people, I think that I observed, maybe 2 people sort of
left
in that category. Yeah, that we just sort of needed a lot more breaks and just sort of stayed in their room. Some people just get really tired, sleepy, and they just sleep for a big part of it just because they're probably exhausted. So there's, I think, a variety of different ways that it plays out depending on the individual. But yeah, it was funny. And then just for me personally, like after on the day 3, everything's just really vivid. You have so much clarity, like time feels just a little bit slower. So that whole notion of like feeling a bit of that. And then the funniest thing was just going to a cafe the next day. It was so weird. Like just, it felt so loud and people talking, and you've gone from this world where you've been, I guess, essentially connected to people for 25 people for 3 days, but you haven't really said more than 5 words to them over that period of time. But there's this still, like, imagine just sitting there eating dinner, right? And there's 25 people at like these tables and there's just not a word being said.
That sounds like my worst nightmare.
So you're just like eating food and you're just concentrating. Awful. Like, so you get so present into eating, and
no, that's terrible.
It's actually was really cool. It was so different. Yeah. Because for the first time ever.
Did you look at each other while you're eating?
Well, everyone was just like, it was just such a calm energy in there. Like everyone was just like eating slowly. You hear like the spoon on the plate. You know, there was no one in a rush. Like it's just such a different type of eating experience.
Did you look at anyone? Did you look at anyone?
Yeah, like people would look around and like people smile and they do all that. Like there's little subtleties in it, or like you nearly bump into someone and you put your arm up or whatever. But yeah, like people are like looking around and checking out the surroundings. But yeah, it was a very different experience. But I think going back to your point, it's nearly like the world that we're living in. Like these types of forms of activities are pretty valuable as a reset. Like what you kind of did was maybe a version of that, where you just said, look, for 3 days, 4 days, I'm just going to sit here and watch House of Dragons, right? Like that is also quite different to your normal routine. So it's nearly like a pattern break or a reset. That silent meditation version is probably a more extreme. Like the way that I put it is, you know, because I've spoken to a few people about it, is would I recommend it to everyone? Probably not. Like I think it's one of those things where it would be the equivalent of maybe jumping into a half a marathon or a marathon straight away as your first experience. Like I'd probably get comfortable with like a 20-minute meditation or a few of the apps first, and then go and do that. But then for others, I think there was a lot of people there that had never meditated before, and that was their first experience with it, and they loved it. So it's just, but I think the foundational concept there is just really simplifying things and slowly working through just the repetitive thought patterns. Because that's what I just find personally, is that when time feels like it's going really fast and you feel overwhelmed or you feel de-energized, a lot of the time it's just because there's just flicking on from the phone to an email to Slack to checking something to going to do this task to that task to another action to another meeting, and then all of a sudden it's 1 a.m. and it's like, all right, what just happened?
That's why often when I find friends who come up to me and say they're lost, I often help them make the reframe. It's not that you're lost, it's just that you're really overwhelmed. You're overwhelmed by all the stimuli. You're overwhelmed by all the thoughts. You're overwhelmed by all the unread emails. And once you label it as lost, then you feel like you have no power. Once you label it as overwhelm, then you can realize, well, just sort one thing out at a time, right? Just pick one and then work on that one first. And I think that's what it sounds like the silent retreat allows people to do, is sit. It's like almost like you're sitting still so that the dust settles in the glass of muddy water. And as the mud kind of settles, you can go, oh, damn, there's this one really dirty bit on the glass that I couldn't see while all that dirt was in the water. But now it's settled. I've got 3 really dirty parts of the glass that I need to clean. You know, and I think we often don't give ourselves that silence, and we don't reserve all of our ducks so that we can put all of them towards the things that matter most.
Yeah. And even if like meditation sounds like too rah-rah and it's a bit out there for most people, like if you think about it, there's activities in our day-to-day that give us similar experiences, right? Like when you're having a shower, generally there's not really much else you can do other than have your shower, you know, like, and be there with your thoughts. If you journal, it's the same thing. If you exercise, it's the same thing. If you play golf, it's the same thing. If you read, it's the same thing. If you're watching a TV show and you're not doing anything else, it's the same thing. It's just finding activities where they're nearly singular and you're only really have 1 or 2 thought processes going at that time, just to sort of, you know, you're more in idle rather than in gear. And I think as humans, we need that balance and that mixture. Whereas if we're just always in gear and driving, there's a limitation there. I just don't think we can operate at that level for a sustained period of time. And we need to then recorrect it. And it happens naturally. You know, some people do it with alcohol, they do it with drugs, they do it in different forms where they have these ways to pattern reset. Coffee, cigarettes, like these things were, I think, even invented over time. It's just some probably have different implications on your health. Now they've been replaced more probably with like meditation and exercise and joining a community or whatever it is. But it's finding those little resets. I wanted to go back though to your point that you made at the start of this though, is I think Mark talks about being comfortable, like we live in a society where so much about it is about being exceptional, right? Like even you just said it before, you checked Mark's social media. So 10 minutes ago, we were celebrating that you went from 10,000 to 600.
Yeah.
Now you're probably a little bit disappointed that you don't have a meal like Mark.
No,
right?
I think I was doing that. I was doing that for humor.
I know, as a joke. As a joke, of course.
That was a joke.
I'm mucking around.
I mean, I genuinely don't. It's weird, right? Because we've done so many of these podcasts now that I think I've reached a level of comfort of not trying to be something that I'm not on these podcasts, right? And I think that's a cool place to be, because I feel that I'm able to share more of who I am. And as a result, I really believe that, again, you know, one of the core reasons I wanted to do this was for my kids in the future, that they can see more of who I am by me getting more comfortable with this platform. And yeah, to be transparent, I am excited by the growth on social media, because the number of DMs I get now and comments where people are saying really beautiful things, it makes me feel really good, but I'm also not attached to it. I see it. I'm like, wow, that's really nice. So it feels good and it feels exciting. And I will be transparent here too. You know, I check my followership maybe 10 to 15 times a day to see if it's growing. That's a lot. But I don't feel competitive. I don't feel like, oh, damn, Mark's got 1 million. You know, I don't feel that. I just feel like, man, I'm still really shocked that it's growing at the level it's growing. And yeah, it's just like, to me, it's crazy. I think partly because I've been doing this for 9-10 years, man. And 99% of my growth has happened in the last 8 months.
Yep. For sure. That's
so
awesome.
It's one of those weird things that happen. I don't know what it is, man. People, so many of my speaking friends and thought leader buddies have reached out and go, hey, what are you doing differently? Do you have any insight to share? And the answer is, I don't really know. I mean,
the answer is I'm not telling you.
yeah, well, it's not even that, because I would tell them if I had clarity on what it is, right? I just think it's you get good at something when you struggle with it for 9 years, right? And which again brings us back to that point of, I mean, there was a great quote from Freud who says, one day in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. And you think about the times where you sit down and you reminisce with your team, or you reminisce with your friends or your family. We tend to reminisce about the days where things were hard. I tend to sit down and reminisce about when I used to work in a takeaway store with my cousin, and it was working for my family. And we would reminisce about how early we'd have to get up, how we had to cut bread and butter it at like 6 a.m. and then stand and serve during the lunch rush times. And I would, I'll reminisce with my other buddies about how we used to work at a petrol station, etc. And we tend to, and even you and I sit and reminisce about the tough times when we first started our business. We had no idea what we were doing. And that quote just reminds me that struggle can be framed as a bad thing. Suffering can be framed as a bad thing. But in hindsight, struggle, suffering, difficult times, they become the things you remember the most, and that you look fondly upon. You look really fondly upon in the future. You go, oh, remember that time where we worked really hard and we had all these failures. And you look at the books. Some of the books are the most exciting. Another podcast shout out to an episode we did in the past, Catch of the Decade. The whole book was not about the moment where they achieved the massive exit of hundreds of millions. Probably took about 3 pages to tell. The other 197 pages of the book were about the moments of struggle, and you should have seen the way they wrote about it. There was so much joy and energy and enthusiasm behind the way they wrote about all the past failures and struggles and painful moments.
Yeah, we just
it's interesting. It's interesting to make that reframe.
We just launched soft launched our Future Golf app yesterday, and it was really cool. Like, we got to jump on to a call with the tech crew, like Jeremy and Teeks and CK who built it, and it was just a really cool moment, just sort of sharing with the guys that how extremely proud they should be of that journey. Because now the app's out there, it's going to be in the world, but it's really the last 15 months through the battle and the problem solving and the struggle and, trying to figure that out and building something that's just unique and special. It's like, I think you get those moments very rarely, even in a career or in a lifetime, where you get to work on something like that with a group of people. So it was just, nearly acknowledging that journey and that moment and being like, remember this and take stock of that story and that journey and be proud of what you guys have done, because it is something very special. And I'm sure that'll be something that they'll look back on in years to come and be like, oh, remember those 3 a.m. nights where we found a bug or had to rewrite this API. Like, what does that then look like? And I think it's a really cool concept. And you're right. Like, they're the stories that we always go back to. It's not the easy ones or the ones that just sort of landed on our laps. You're right.
When's the last time you and I ever reminisced about a win that was easy?
Yeah, we give those a couple of minutes generally. Like, even the wins in general. Like, if you think about it, we don't spend. We celebrate them and we'll be like, oh, proud of you, well done, good job. But we spend a lot more time and effort, I think, on the process.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
Rather than, like, we don't sit there and be like, all right, let's go out for dinner and go celebrate. I don't think we've ever done that with any of the wins. Like, let's go celebrate this. It's generally just leads into another process rather than getting stuck into that. But yeah, that's cool.
I've got another passage here, which is really cool too. And it says, this in a nutshell is what self-improvement is really about. Prioritize better values, choosing better things to give a duck about, because when you give better ducks, you get better problems. And when you get better problems, you get a better life. And I feel like that's just a really nice summary to capture us talking about, problems, processes, etc. it's really think about what your core values are. And I think really analyze what your values are and really have them in front of you so you see them with clarity. And then every time something makes you react emotionally, whether it's good or bad, just cross-check it with the values that you currently have. And just cross-check always to see if your values are still serving you. And if they're not, maybe it's time to update those values. Maybe you set a value when you were 18 and that value was, I want to become a millionaire. And you look at your life right now and that value is no longer serving you. Remove that value. Put something else in there that's more that's going to serve you more, right? Because the reality is a lot of the times the values that we have, they may not be the values that we've chosen for ourselves. Those values may be generational. They may be passed on through family. They may be passed on through friendship group, social circle. They may be passed on because of the company you work at. Just check in on that. I feel like so much of what we've spoken about here is making sure you have alignment, making sure you solve the problems that are based around the values that you have. That's going to help you get to those better problems. Because I can tell you now, when you have better problems, solving them becomes more exciting.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Any last thoughts, Ali, as we round out this episode?
Yeah, mine would have been pretty aligned with that. Like, I think it's maybe a more simplified version of mine as I'm doing those checkpoints would be is why am I doing this? What actions do I need to take? And then what metrics am I going to use to measure the actions and the reasons of why I'm going down this path? I think that's the other real key part is just the more and more I look at it is metrics. Just having metrics to be able to test whether the path that you're embarking on is the one that you need to continue going down. You know, I think that's what I've learned more and more of just recently is that, all right, it's great to have goals and it's great to have actions and a bit of a plan, but then also having a way to quickly measure if that's progressing in a direction that you want and having the right ways to measure that align with what you're trying to do and then making the adjustment pretty quick. I think that's one of the most difficult things is quickly changing course after going down the path because the sunk cost fallacy kind of sneaks in. It's like, all right, well, we've already committed to this, so we better just go do it. We can't change this now, or we know this works. Let's just keep doing that. I think really testing myself on rethinking some of my assumptions and not getting too comfortable with the thinking and the moves that have got me to certain points.
And I guess I'll leave everyone with just the biggest reframe that I got. And it's who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for. And it's such a different way of thinking about life. It's have a think about, because what I did was I started to write down what are the top 5 things I'm willing to struggle for now in my life. And in other words, what I'm saying there is, what are 5 things I'm willing to work hard for, that I'm really willing to go through some tough times for? You know, and that just gave me great clarity and a great mental shift and reframe. So that when I go through hard times, I don't think, oh man, this is so hard. But instead I think, no, I choose this pain. I choose this because of who it's going to make me, or because of who I'm going to become as a result of struggling in this way.
Yep.
Right. And I think that for me was a great shift that this book has helped me with.
Love that.
Well, look, thanks everyone. Thanks so much for joining Ali and I for another episode of the Vinh and Ali Show, where we take books that we read and we try to extract some of the wisdom and share it with you best we can possible. Look, if you enjoyed the show, please head on over to your favorite podcast app that you use and maybe rate us, give us a rating, whatever you feel we deserve. I think we deserve 5 stars. And that's just me speaking to your subconscious mind there.
Yeah.
And look, leave us a review.
We're not telling you to give 5 stars, but we're not encouraging it. No. But 5 stars.
If you feel like it, then you should just do it and give us one of your ducks, because we'd love it.
Just
all right.
Give us 5
ducks.
Everyone.
Yeah, give us 5 ducks. That would be great. And maybe even more ducks, and take the time to write us a little bit of a review.
Oh, that would be so special.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.